Technical SEO is such a vast topic, and it's something that a few people, Tony Montana, I'm looking at you, have asked me to cover on the channel. Now, I'm no expert in technical SEO, so I asked a friend of mine, Louise Amor, who runs Mimosa Marketing, to come on and talk about technical SEO because it is her expertise. Now, whether you're a complete beginner or you see yourself as a more advanced technical SEOer, is that even a word? I'm not sure. Anyway, it doesn't matter because I think there are some golden nuggets in this interview and you'll take something away no matter what level you are. Let's roll the interview. So a big welcome to the Affiliate School YouTube channel to Louise from Mimosa Marketing. Louise, I've dragged you on here today to ask you to talk about technical SEO, which is something that I've got, a little bit of awareness of, but I certainly wouldn't profess to be an expert in the field, which is why I've asked you to come along, so no pressure. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and why perhaps I might have asked you to come and deliver this?
Yeah, sure. So my background originally was probably about 20 years in marcom roles in tech companies, sort of prior to the digital era. So then I took the plunge and got into search marketing about 8 years ago. I went agency side, worked as an SEO account manager in a pure SEO agency for about 2.5 years. And then I set up Mimosa Marketing. And so for the last 3.5 years, I've been working as a freelance SEO consultant. Although sort of working for myself, my skills are now much wider. I've expanded that expertise beyond enterprise SEO, do a lot more local SEO, paid search, and I work with a number of companies helping them with their analytics and reporting alongside their search projects, basically.
Fantastic. So yeah, I'm going to try and grill you on a few pre-prepared questions. And I suppose the first one for me is, there'll be a lot of people watching this video who won't have a huge amount of knowledge about technical SEO. And really for someone like myself who only knows the basics, what actually is it? What is technical SEO?
What is it? Sorry. Yeah, so
big question.
Technical SEO basically refers to the many factors that can be optimized to help search engines to crawl, index, and then sort of render and understand your content. And performance is a big part of that as well, because basically a slow website isn't really good for user experience. And obviously search engines really care about delivering pages that are offer the best user experience. So once the search engine discovers content from your pages and understands them, it can then decide which ones are worth worth indexing, and whether they should rank them on a query by query basis compared with all the other pages that they've got in the index already.
Okay, so I think you've kind of just covered this here, but how important actually is it? From, I suppose, is it the bigger the website, the more important technical SEO is, or even for a blogger with 100 pages on a website, is it still just as important?
I think as the sites get bigger and older, you can come across more legacy issues. It definitely, managing those SEO elements, whether you're large or small, can influence how the web pages rank. But no website or web page is ever the same. So it's really hard to compare one page for another. So basically you need to make sure your website isn't worse than your competitors, and a fast website with good technical SEO metrics won't make up for poor content. So I'd say that going back to your question, if you have a new website or a small website that's just sort of getting off the ground, it's really good if you can put the latest best practices in place from the beginning, and that will really benefit you. So those larger, more established sites are more likely to have those technical SEO issues because guidelines have changed over time, user expectations have changed, use of devices has sort of evolved, and much more of a mobile world nowadays, and people expect really fast sort of response times, etc. So I often see the biggest issues when a website has gone through a redesign, or a developer's changed, they don't like the URL structure and want to change everything, and they mess up redirects and everything, or there's just been a CMS migration or something. So often people forget about the legacy content that might be in Google's index, and they only see what they can navigate through sort of on their page to page on their site. So it's often these duplicate, the poor quality and duplicate, that hampers a site's performance.
Okay, that's interesting. And so if let's say we've got a more of a legacy site, a site that's been around for a few years, and you come along and correct the technical SEO issues that are present, or someone else goes in and does that, what sort of results typically could we expect to see from that?
So it does depend. It depends on the issue. Sometimes it can be like flipping a switch. So if you see from your crawl report that crawlers can't even access your website, then flipping that round, removing site-wide no indexes, or removing a complete sort of duplicate copy of your website will see a quick shift in results. Other optimization tactics might be more of a tick box exercise to bring your site up to a baseline. So you really need to think about your specific site, which optimizations will move the needle compared to competing pages from other sites. What do their listings look like in the SERPs? Which audience are you targeting? So you need to think about geography, language, device. You'll have this unique setup and a unique audience. So you need to make a call on the right improvements and then monitor those closely.
Okay, so I mean, you've already said a lot of things that I'm kind of sitting here and listening and thinking, oh, I don't know what that means. So I'm sure there are other people sitting and watching this video that will feel the same. Don't worry, we're going to try and break this down a little bit, aren't we? And by the way, we've got Tony Montana to blame for this. So if you're sitting there and watching this and thinking this is going completely over my head, Tony Montana is a subscriber to the channel who has requested 3 or 4 times on various videos for a good overview of technical SEO. So Tony, you better like this video because this is mainly because of you. So anyway, can we try and break this down a little bit? So, into more kind of bite-sized chunks. I guess, do you go in almost with like you just mentioned, a checklist or a tick box exercise?
I definitely have a checklist. But you often find going down sort of certain rabbit holes when you sort of find, it's quite exciting that you've found this massive issue that no one's found before, and that could be like the big fix. I normally break the list down into 3 key areas. And so I'll jump through those one at a time. So first off, I'd look at crawlability of the sites. If your site can't be crawled, or your pages can't be crawled by the search engine bots, so Google bots and Bing bots, if they can't be found, then they won't be added to the queue to be even considered for indexing. And there are various things to check when assessing whether your site's being crawled or not. You'd probably go into Search Console and look at the crawl report there, if you've got that set up, and also to see if the bots are even visiting your website or only a section of your site. Then I'd look at the robots.txt file. When a crawler arrives at your website for the first time, the robots.txt file is the first page it will go to check if it's even allowed to go and visit that page. And the file is located in the root directory. So for example, website.com/robots.txt. So sometimes you'll find that developers use the robots.txt file to disallow access to crawlers from a staging or dev site before it's actually launched, and then they might forget to remove this when the site goes live. Or you might even just find that there's been a simple error in the file which prevents access to crawlers to a particular section of the site. Once again, that might have been sort of work in progress. So what I'll do is provide a link to Google's guidance around this file in the description, and then you can sort of see what it should look like for a basic site. So now we should really talk about your XML sitemap. It's really good to aid the discovery of your web pages. using one of these sitemaps, and you can link it into your robot.txt file. So an XML sitemap is basically a list of all the pages that you want this search engine to index. They're your top pages, your most important pages. And you can submit your XML sitemap as well via Search Console, and it will help you to understand which of your those submitted pages are indexed and which aren't. What we'll do is cover this in a bit more detail shortly when we look at the coverage report in Search Console. So no doubt you'll know that external links are important to your site. It's not just to improve your site authority. It's also important to get other reputable websites to link to yours so that your new content is discovered and indexed quickly. So if your website isn't linked to, crawlers won't visit your site very often, even if you've got an XML sitemap that's updated dynamically. You actually have to encourage the crawlers to come to your site, and normally that's via other links. So the more search engines discover your pages via those links, the quicker they'll discover your new content and think that it's from a reputable and reliable place that they can trust. So external links, even though they are really off-page, part of an off-page SEO strategy, do aid crawlability, and they're sort of part of that, the part of technical SEO.
I think that's really interesting, actually, because not everyone, particularly in the blogging space, do look at external links in that much detail. It's something that I do, but not everyone does. But I'd never really thought about it from a crawlability point of view, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And there's so many issues at the moment, particularly with niche websites and blogs, whereby people are having these indexing issues. But that's something that you could potentially do to overcome that.
Yeah, definitely. Your content will be found, but if you want it to be found quickly, that might, the more times that a crawler's come into your site, the more likely it is to sort of get deeper down. And then my next point is all about your navigation and how you can get the crawlers to go to that deeper, newer content quicker. So moving on, the website navigation, it really can help impact how well your site is crawled. So once the crawler actually comes to your site, we want the navigation, the top nav and the footer to lead crawlers down to all of our pages. So when you're setting up your site structure, you might want to think ahead about how you want your content to evolve, and then base that structure, the URL structure around that, and then add sections as you go. So bots should be able to crawl through your web pages like a waterfall, from your homepage to your category pages and then to the individual blog pages. Although that does assume that all blogs are of equal value, which obviously they're not as time goes on. And you also need to remember that web crawlers can't type. So they move from page to page via href links, and pages that are hidden behind a form or a checkbox that needs to be clicked won't be crawled, and that authority won't flow through the site as you might have hoped, and that's really detrimental to those deeper pages. So I've seen it quite a lot, especially, maybe it's not as relevant here, but on international language sites, where to navigate to that international subfolder, you need to fill in a form, select a country, and then hit a submit button, and that's sort of really detrimental to the crawlability of those pages.
And then how does that fit in with internal links? I think you were probably just about to move on to that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So internal linking is really quite hot and very important for content discovery. It ties back as well to the site structure and the navigation to some extent, because internal linking can help distinguish which are your most important pages, and the anchor text gives content to the page that's being linked to. For example, you can steer crawlers to your most important pages deeper in the site architecture by adding a link to them from your homepage or other well-crawled pages. So, for example, you'll see on many websites, on the homepage, for instance, they have a section for new or popular articles. They're probably not popular because no one's heard of them yet, but if you link to them from your homepage, it will direct users and crawlers to the new content. So it will be discovered, crawled, and hopefully indexed that bit quicker.
Okay, fantastic. So that's kind of in a nutshell. But if we want to go in and put this into practice, what do we do? How do we identify these issues? How do we look for any possible errors on our website?
Yeah, so you can get an understanding for how crawlers see your website and any glaring errors by using crawling software. And I like to use Screaming Frog. Screaming Frog also has a free license that would be really good for your subscribers. So you can crawl up to 500 URLs for free. And there's also a visualization tool as part of that. There are quite a few crawlers on the market, but Screaming Frog is really flexible. And to be honest, the full license is quite reasonable anyway, if you're going to be using it regularly. So as I said, Screaming Frog emulates how Googlebot or Bingbot would crawl your site and respects the same rules and tags that you have in place. So the crawl report shows you which pages can and can't be accessed, as well as any errors. So when crawling, be considerate, use a slow crawl speed, or even crawl outside of usual hours where visitors might be visiting, so you don't impact the site performance.
Is it possible to see this in action, Louise?
Yeah, sure. That's our next step. Let's do a demo.
Okay. Because I've used Screaming Frog, but I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. I'm sure you're going to teach me something that I can take away today. Right,
so hopefully you can see my screen, which is showing a crawl that I've already completed. So basically, I just found a random website of a sort of quite not too big, not too small. I often go on holiday to Lyme Regis, so what I did is sort of found the Town Mill website, and I've gone through that. When I first sort of run the crawl, I can't remember the details of what you can and can't customize with the free version, because I have got the paid version. But there's a few things you can check to help your technical SEO. You can see here at the top all the different URLs, and then it breaks it down into the different sort of types. So HTML version, HTML pages, PDFs, images, etc. What you can do is check for internal links for your pages and make sure they're not going through to any non-secure pages, because that's a big no-no. You shouldn't have links to resources or other pages that are HTTP. So you can see that here under security. So this website's got links to 47 other URLs or resources, and you can see here.
Sorry, so that website is linking out to 47 HTTP URLs. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So it's when it's done the crawl, it's actually found a link to the old version of the site, the non-secure version. And if you click on the in link, so I've got that old homepage highlighted. And then if you click in the bottom window and click on in links, you can see how that page is being linked to. And you just see that there is the home. It's a site-wide error. It's a navigational error. So you just need to update that hyperlink there on the home anchor text. So you can see patterns, and something might seem like a massive problem. And then, you narrow it down, just look for trends. And then you can also see code responses. So you can look and see here how many error pages you have. You can check your redirects. Are they the redirects that you'd expect? Are you using the right status code? Because permanent redirects are 301, and that's the one you'd always want to see. So going back to that home page, you can see that it is actually redirecting correctly to the HTTPS version, but you're still pointing to it from that other sort of internal link. So you just need to remove that, and then that won't be crawled and that sort of disappear. Then you can also look for images by size. Which are the biggest images? Which ones are causing most problems, slowing down those pages? Sometimes it can be a ridiculously, a tiny little logo somewhere in the footer that's impacting every page on the website. It doesn't need to be 7.2 megabytes, for example, on here. You can also look for thin content or duplicate content. So here, there's been obviously sort of a word count set up in the setting somewhere that anything under 200 words is thin content. And then that's something you can customize, and as I said, you need to look at your competitor pages, different lengths. What's important is sort of comparable with what's already out there in the index. Also, you can look for analytics, for example, to check that the analytics, it's not SEO, but you want to track all this. You want to make sure that the code, either with Tag Manager or Google Analytics, is on that page, so you're tracking it so that GA sort of gives you a true picture. Moving on a little bit, you can configure the crawl to work with Search Console, to go with link up with Google Analytics, and you can even link it up with page speed insights, and then you can sort of look at the page speed before and after you've made those changes and make that comparison. So there are 1,000,001 ways that you can use this software, and basically that could be a YouTube series in itself, I'd say.
Yeah,
so what
absolutely.
we could do maybe is add a link to the Screaming Frog user guide in the description for anyone that wants to look into any further, because the documentation on there is amazing.
Yeah, there's so much that can be helpful for all websites, really, I suppose, but even with niche sites, blogging sites, just the thin content tool that you showed us there, purely just that, and the image, finding those larger images. I think just those two tools would be hugely beneficial to a lot of people. So thank you. And I didn't know you could do either of those two things. So thanks for that. Okay, so we've touched on indexing already. We've said it's an important area to think about in terms of technical SEO. What are the key things to consider with it? What are are there any key things that we can do as site owners to really tackle this area of indexing? Because there's so many, it's such a hot topic at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So the most important thing is to work out what you have indexed, what you don't, and is what you have indexed what you want to be indexed. So you can check this out in Search Console. So if that's Google Search Console. So if you don't have that set up, it's fairly easy to do. You just need to verify your site using your Google user profile that's got edit rights in Google Analytics and your Google Analytics property. So it's really important. If you've got old duplicate versions of your site index, it can really affect how well your primary site performs, because you've just got a ton of duplicate content out there, and then Google's not sure which version of this homepage should I be ranking, which version of this blog, if it sort of exists with lots of different protocols and with www and not without it. So I think it's a good idea to set up a domain property in Search Console, because you can then check which versions of your site are indexed and make sure that all other versions 301 redirect to your primary website. And you can quickly do this as well, just by using the site command in the browser. And then you can start seeing if there's wwws without www, HTTP, HTTPS, how many versions of your pages actually exist. Okay, so here I have Search Console open. This isn't actually a domain level one, as I just proposed. I can do it at domain level and at the sort of the master primary website level. So I'll just quickly jump in to show you where the crawl stats report was, and that is in settings, and then you'd open the report here. So if you really weren't sure if your site was being crawled or it was and now it isn't, you can sort of dig down here and sort of get that sort of information just to get rid of those worries or confirm them. So if you just look back as well to the overview, you'll see the vertical navigation aligns with these sort of top level charts here. So you've got performance, coverage, the page experience, and that's sort of broken down here, and any enhancements that are actually sort of linked to schema. So as I said, we're going to have a look at the coverage report. So here it's broken down, this report, into 4 areas, and you can look at all known pages, or the submitted pages. So we'll look at all of them to begin with. So as I say, errors are here. Any URLs with warnings here. Now, valid pages are the pages that are indexed. So that's what you'll see, all that lovely green. And because I've got all known pages selected, it tells me how many pages I've submitted and are indexed. So how many URLs from my sitemap that I've submit are indexed, and then also how many URLs are indexed that are on top of those I've submitted as my most important pages. And then we've got those pages that Google has determined are not worthy of indexing. And this is where you can sort of get a lot of insights. So basically, there is a ton of information that can be gleaned from this, and you can find problems with your most important URLs, those in the sitemap, and take steps to fix those. You can identify index URLs that aren't listed and determine if they're affecting your preferred pages from ranking, because what you don't want is 2 pages competing for the same terms, for example, or you want the canonical version of your pages to rank, really. And so you basically look at these excluded pages and decide whether we need to change how Google should treat them or potentially even remove them. As I say, with older sites, more pages are sort of created that you might not even be aware of, especially when you get to like the pagination. And unfortunately, I guess the sites that we're dealing with here probably won't have facets and filters, and it won't get awfully complex. So often you'll find that Google hasn't indexed some of these pages, and it's for a good reason, because you really don't want them to be indexed. But sometimes it doesn't quite get it right. You might be giving it the wrong information. You might find that meta tags and hints are set up wrong, and they're preventing the pages you want to be indexed from being accessed. Or you might find that you've had duplicate pages that have been created that you need to fix, or your content isn't indexed because it's duplicate or thin or poor quality. And that might include things like category pages, tag pages, author pages, or pagination.
So how much, with category pages, for example, is that something that you would look to have indexed, or at least have it crawlable, or is that something that you would potentially no index?
I think it depends on how many variations. So if you've got a blog and you've got categories and you've got tags and you've got author pages, you don't want too many sort of pages that show the same thing. So, and also think about category. It depends how you're organizing your site. If you are doing reviews on dog related things and then cat related things and then rabbit related things, it might be the case that your hub page might be that category page, but then you index all your tag pages, or you index all your author pages, or the pages that show basically the same results pages on the site that maybe the category page is showing. So it depends really on what content you have and how you've organized your content, how you've organized that content, I'd say.
So with that example, I suppose those category pages would almost be like mini home pages. Would that be fair to say? Almost like
Yeah,
a hub page for
exactly. Yeah, and then you can
for
optimize
all
it
of the
for,
content that then, yeah,
dog product reviews, or I don't know, it
yeah,
depends
yeah.
on the keyword research. What I'd say for pagination is, if it is the version of the pagination that you want to be indexed, not these other duplicate tags or author pages, those pages need to self-canonicalize. I've seen so many times that people canonicalize it to that top level page, and then, that's not really going to help you. You want those pages to be indexable, those pagination pages, because then they can be crawled and that content accessed and checked. Is it changed? Is it still up to date, etc.? Okay, so I think that's given a reasonable outline of Search Console. So we'll just jump into sort of a high level outline of structured data.
Okay.
Because I think this also sits
Something
in
nice
that
and light then.
technical SEO bucket. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's basically a markup language that helps search engines to understand your content, helps you to understand entities on the page, and it can affect how your content is actually shown in the SERP. So it's worthwhile understanding what structured data might already be on your pages. I mean, your developers might, if you have a developer, might have set it up, as part of a plugin, and you might be oblivious. And you can also check out what your competitors have in place. So what I suggest doing is using the rich results tool to show you what structured data is there, and how it's performing, if it's flagging any flags, so to speak. So I'll just jump to that in my browser, and we can share that page.
Yeah, brilliant.
So basically, it's a bit like all the other Microsoft tools, the PageSpeed Insights, mobile friendly test. You just enter the URL that you want to look into here at the top, and it would test that live URL and start trawling through to look for that code. So what I've done is I've just looked at a few blogs that I could find on the web and see what they have in place, and sort of see if it aligns with what I was thinking. So here is a very nice and tidy. I've never seen search structured data so tidy on the back end as this. Like, everything's big green tick. The things I note in particular here are the articles, the article schema they've got in place, and breadcrumb schema. I mean, you can make this really complicated and sort of mark everything up, but you don't need to make it that complicated. As I say, just think about what your competitors are doing and how their pages look in the search results pages. So going back to this moneysavingexpert.com blog, similarly, it's got breadcrumbs, it's got the logo marked up as part of the organization schema, and once again it's got articles. I'm in two minds whether you use articles or blog posting. I was trying to look for blog posting, but everyone seems to be using articles. There is one warning here, but it's just because they're not linking through to say the Wikipedia page of Martin Lewis, for example. But I mean, it will still work. It's just like, this is one thing, and it's an optional field that hasn't been filled in. So for most sites that feature blogs, you could, as I say, you could use the articles or blog posting schema.
Okay, and this might be too much to do in this video, but how would you apply this structured data? Would you use a plugin? Would you just add the code manually?
I would use whichever plugin you are. Do your research. I mean, I'm not a developer, but I do my research. I find out which is like the user friendly. I mean, if you've got a developer, I'd ask them, but you'd use the user friendly plugin and then test it and see what's how it's working. Basically, which fields do you add in? Like, I was fixing one breadcrumb I flagged it up as a problem because it was in Search Console for breadcrumbs, and it was just that the information was in the wrong place, and it's just quite a simple fix.
Yeah.
Really. So as I said, a page level tag, you'd use articles or blog posting schema to let the search engines know that your content is a blog. Because if for a particular query, all the other, it might be a small tick in the box, all the other pages that are ranking for that are blogs or articles, and it knows it's going to pull that out as an option. It's just another tick in the box. If your content is laid out in a question and answer format, you can mark up each of those questions and answers with FAQ schema, and that might help you to get an improved click-through rate in the SERP. It might mean that you get a question in a people always ask sort of box, so that could work for you. This might be a bit of a long shot, but you could potentially, if you're lucky enough to have some amazing expert write your reviews or content, that also is referenced in the knowledge graph, then you could put a link to that page under the author or person in the blog posting schema or article schema, because that will sort of help with your EAT potentially. As for site-wide schema, if you've spent a lot of time crafting a really useful site structure and breadcrumb navigations in place, then you can use that breadcrumb schema, sort of we alluded to when we looked at the rich results test. So then that means that in the search results pages, instead of having the full URL above your sort of page title in the results, you will actually see that breadcrumb. So you can sort of set that up so it looks really nice. It's good for the user. And what I would say is potentially avoid using maybe the year and the date, like some older blogs or even news articles might do, because that's not really helpful. And also it makes your data look a bit aged, your content look a bit aged.
So Louise, you mentioned earlier, you talked a bit about website performance being part of technical SEO. What can we do in this regard? Have you got any specific advice you can give us to, make our website performance as optimal as it possibly could be?
Sure, there's lots of advice to be given here. It's a bottomless pit, really. So basically, when pages are matched for a particular search phrase from a content perspective, the page offering the better user experience is more likely to be the page that ranks better, you'd hope at least. And Google's most recent algorithm relating to performance is actually the page experience update. And what we can do again is add a link to if you're happy with that, link to the documentation in the description for people to have a look at. So Google rates the performance and speed of websites on a page-by-page basis, as I mentioned. So for a good page experience, Google looks for a handful of things that sort of tick all the boxes. So firstly, it wants to see secure HTTPS pages, is when we were looking at Screaming Frog, how there would be things that I'd recommend straight away that we need to avoid and stop linking to internally. You need a website that is secure and has a current high security HTTPS certificate. Then secondly, Google wants to see mobile friendly pages. So pages must be mobile friendly with a responsive page design. And you can always check this out in Search Console. That was one of the experience reports. Or you can do on a page level, you could use the Google mobile friendly test. And then Google also doesn't want to see pages with intrusive interstitials. It's always a mouthful. So you need to make sure that content is immediately accessible to users when they arrive at your website. No user wants to go to a website and then it's got, a massive, you can't work out where the content is because you're trying to search for a tiny little X to close this pop-up in the corner of the page. So try to avoid using those interstitials on desktop and mobile. Used to just be mobile, that was the issue. I mean, you can use them, but don't use them so they completely cover the content, or use them on the second page that someone might navigate to. Normally, I think the guidelines were that a pop-up that's about the size of a cookie banner on a mobile is acceptable, but probably need to look more detail at the specific guidelines for that. And finally, the 3 core web vitals metrics gauge whether your site is fast loading, interactive, and also stable for the user. And these 3 metrics are really an extension of the previous page speed metrics that we've all sort of grown to love over the years. So in basic terms, the 3 core web vitals look at, firstly, how long it takes for the largest content element to appear on the page at page load, and that could be the big hero image. So if you've got some gigantic image, that metric is going to be quite poor. You can also quickly see how quickly the page reacts to user interaction. And thirdly, whether the page layout shifts a lot for the user when it loads. There's nothing more annoying than scrolling down a page, go to tick a box and the box moves somewhere, especially when you're trying to buy something. So Search Console reports on your website's mobile friendliness and the core web vitals. And it assesses groups of similar pages that might be using the same template. So it can be a bit easier to identify sort of common problem areas that you can fix once, and you fix it across a lot of pages. But you can also drill down to URL level if you need to, if something's particularly sort of underperforming. And you can also use, thinking about the page speed side of things, Page Speed Insights is a tool that's been around for a long time, and it sort of changes its look and feel quite a lot, and especially now that we've got the core web vitals. And that will help you to understand why your page is slow to load. And there are other page speed tools around as well, and they now also include the core web vitals. That's what everyone's interested in. But I've got a few tips for using the page speed testing tools as well. So what I would suggest is that you always use them in incognito mode, because if you're using Chrome and you've got a lot of extensions, that can actually impact whether they work or not, or whether they show the right result. So without all those extensions affecting those tools, that's the best way to go. Also assess the page templates individually. Don't need to test every page, but maybe your home page and your category page and your blog page. And obviously the blog pages will vary depending on what images you've got on those pages, but generally the framework will be very similar. And also try to compare yourself against your competition and try and stay one step ahead, and take the readings with a pinch of salt. Don't get too worked up on them, because depending on how many people are using the tool at that particular time of day will impact those results as well. So basically, page speed tools flag underperformance, and examples of this might include, it might sort of highlight that you have really slow web hosting, so that's something to look into if the time to first byte is really poor. It might highlight your images are huge, they're not compressed, or they're not Google's preferred format, and they're really pushing WebP. Or you're, something more simple that maybe whoever built your site didn't include in one of the plugins, like the code might need to be minified. But sort of all of these and, many more things could be impacting your page load and the page experience and those scores. So you just need to try to, not try and get 100% on everything, or, pass everything with flying colours. I mean, it's good if you can, but you just need to be that one step ahead, or not a step behind your competitors, basically. So these tools help you to sort of identify opportunities and just help you to focus your efforts. So
I think that's a good point as well. in the past, I don't do a huge amount of kind of competitor comparison in terms of core web vitals and page speed insights. But whenever I have done that in the past, I'm always surprised at how poorly the competitors are performing. And I'm beating myself up about being at 85%. And, you know, they're at 60 or 50 or something. I know it's not always just the numbers, but yeah, it always surprises me. So I think there's some really good tips there that you've just given. And I didn't know that about the incognito either. So that was, I'll definitely use that. So for anyone who is still watching, and, you know, if they are, I think fair play, because it's a pretty heavy topic, particularly for this channel. This is probably the heaviest stuff that we've covered so far. So, but I think people will have got a huge amount of value from this. But because we've covered so much, and I know what people are like, they want the quick fix. If there were 3 things that we had to focus on initially for you know, in terms of technical SEO, what would you suggest being those 3 things to focus on?
I think you really need to use the tools to sort of help you to focus your efforts to sort of try and flag the biggest problems. So firstly, I'd sort of check for the crawling and indexing issues and use Search Console to do that. I'd check the crawl stats report like I showed previously in Search Console, and have a quick look at the robots.txt. I'd also quickly look at the coverage report and look for any sort of big sort of red flags there. And I didn't mention this earlier, but I'd also look at manual actions and security issues, because if anything's going to stop your website, you know, from working, it's those. Secondly, I'd check for errors. I'd use another tool, the screaming frog that we went through earlier. So I'd check that all pages and resources are secure, all HTTPS. I'd check for broken links, broken pages, and I'd make sure that only the primary version of my site is crawlable, and any redirects I came across point to that secure version of the site, and potentially even remove any link, you know, definitely move the links that are going to any of those non-secure pages. And then finally, I would check that the site is mobile friendly. And I said you can do that by looking in the Search Console again on that report, because basically that ticks so many of the page experience boxes. It also shows whether your content can be rendered, and it stops you, you know, if your pages aren't mobile friendly, you are stopping your pages from being accessible for such a large percentage of potential visitors. So yeah, that's not as succinct as you might have liked, but they're my 3 points.
No, Louise, I think, you know, you've come on here, and I think it is such a huge topic to cover. This could have easily been a 10-part series of 1 hour each, and probably more than that. There's so much to cover, and I think you've given it a really good overview, and you've certainly given me a few things to think about. If there's anyone out there that needs support with their technical SEO, do you offer this as a service? Is it something that people can get in touch with and reach out for help? Yeah,
of course. Yeah, I'm not going to say no. Yeah, you can contact me at louise@mimosamarketing.co.uk, or just follow me on Twitter at Louise Amor. Yeah, sort of, as I say, I've got, my skills are quite broad now, but my core expertise is the SEO, basically. So I'd be happy to help anybody.
Fantastic. Well, Louise, I think I might need to be utilising your services, because I certainly don't focus enough on the technical SEO, certainly not as much as I should do. So I certainly will do now after that. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for asking me on.
Absolutely, anytime. And you do realise that you probably will get Tony on now. So Tony, I hope you enjoyed that, but he's probably going to have some questions, so we might have to get you back on to follow up with that. But yes, thank you ever so much for joining us today.
No problem. Thank you.
Guys, I'm pretty sure you will have found that video useful. I certainly did and have some real takeaways from it. And if you're still not sure and you need support, then do reach out to Louise at those handles that she provided. I'll leave them down in the description below too. If you're still scratching your head when it comes to Search Console, then check out my video here where I give you a Search Console tutorial, probably covering it on a little bit more of a basic level to what Louise just showed us, but hopefully you'll find it useful. Good luck with your sites, guys, and thanks for watching.